Hi everybody, welcome back. It's July 2020. We are still in the midst of the pandemic, although things are starting to open up. In California, things are opening up quite a bit. In the Bay Area, where I'm living, things are not opening up a little more slowly, but it's coming. And I think that people are feeling a little more at ease, a little more comfortable. Evidently, if we wear a mask, we are really protecting ourselves quite a bit, socially distancing, wearing a mask, washing hands. Those kind of basics are really a big preventative. I wanted to talk probably for a couple of videos. A lot of the conversation that's out there now, there's a lot more available online because that's the way that we are communicating with each other more and more. But there's a lot more acceptability, I guess you could say, about the conversations about meditation, quieting your mind, finding peace within. Having a sense of well-being. And I want to talk about that as a very pragmatic choice to make, as opposed to sort of an eye roll of, that's a little like Pollyannish to be thinking that way. And I wanted to talk about love because there's a lot of conversation, a lot of pointing towards the way out of fear is love. And that's accurate. There are two energies in the universe. One is love and one is fear. And the greater of those two is love. But what is love? When we think of love, I think a lot we have associated with love the kind of affection, the kind of intimacy, the kind of closeness you have with significant others, with family members. But I don't know that we really understand the kind of neutral nature that the energy of love is. And I'm not an expert in this. I'm on a learning curve myself. I do have to say that. But I am beginning to really understand more deeply the power of that kind of neutral stance of love. Love really is when you have the experience of being in a state of consciousness that is undisturbed and without fear. That essentially is the nature of love. To be in a state of mind that is undisturbed by fear and gives access to that neutral state of love, which is a state of being. And it's really, there's no way to measure the power of the impact of being in that state of mind, either for yourself or for someone else. So, given the strife that we are dealing with now, the pandemic that we are dealing with, so the physical threat that we're dealing with, the political strife, whatever side of the conversation you're on, there is some feeling of, protecting one's survival, really. The racial conversation that is past time. We do need to be addressing it. But the amount of fear that is rampant in these kind of interactions and conversations, we're seeing the results of it. We're seeing it on the news, and we're seeing it in our own emotional states. So there's also a lot of conversation about the importance of meditation. I would also agree with that. I've been meditating for many years. I was in a conversation a few weeks ago with someone who I admire a great deal. And he was asking me, well, how many moments of bliss do you think you've actually experienced in your years of meditation? And I said, moments of bliss? Maybe one. And he kind of smiled at that. And he said, well, let me show you something. So he created this equation of how many minutes there are in a year. And then he multiplied that by how many years old I am. I'm in my 60s, so it's a good number of minutes. And he contrasted that. He very generously said, well, maybe you've had 20 minutes of bliss. I would disagree with that. I wish I had had 20 minutes of bliss. I think I would be a very different person with 20 minutes of bliss under my belt. But the thing that was interesting to me, because of course the equation pointed to, well, for the 20 minutes of bliss that you've had, given the number of minutes of your life, it doesn't really measure up to a huge impact of time. Now, we didn't have the conversation. The conversation didn't go any further. But I was reflecting on that, and I was reflecting on what is it that's missing in that conversation. And what I saw, because I had made the point that the impact of that moment of bliss is a touchstone. It's a touchstone. As I can remember that moment of bliss, then I can remember what's available to me, what's available to human beings, what's available to all of us. And I can get a perspective on whatever it is I'm dealing with. And I think he understood me to say that if I remember that moment of bliss, I'm going to try and get back there, which you can't really, doesn't work that way. But the thing that's missing, I think, in the conversation is a moment of bliss is actually measured from our linear frame of reference of time. Bliss exists outside of time. There's no time in bliss. So the equation really falls apart because the usefulness of it falls apart in this particular conversation. Because yes, in terms of the number of minutes in my life, I'm not in bliss. I'm mostly dealing with living on the physical plane. But for those moments or moment that I have experienced bliss in the timeless source where bliss resides, if you will, the realm within which bliss exists, the impact of remembering the touchstone of that realm is a powerful, thunderous reminder of who we really are. So meditating, however, to whatever degree of quietness in our mind we can get, gives us a practice of being in that quiet mind, so that when we are disturbed in our thinking, when we are noticing how upset we are, how frightened we are, how angry we are, and we all get triggered by that, no matter how many moments of bliss or how many hours of meditation or how many years of meditation you have been doing, we all still get triggered by each other. And it's grist for the mill, if you will. It gives us some place. It's an indication of the next place to grow and be freed up from when you're hooked by something. However, to practice meditation gives you the ballast of a quiet mind. So in the midst of being upset, you can distinguish, well, I have the capacity to be upset, but oh yes, I've practiced. I also have this capacity to be quiet and calm myself down and have access to a higher quality of thinking than this quality of thinking that I have here. That's quite reactive and quite justified in reacting. Quite justified in my indignation and outrage over what's going on. Which is not to say that it isn't outrageous what is happening. That it isn't cruel what's happening. That it isn't egregious what is happening and what we as human beings do to each other. But we also have the capacity to heal. And healing takes something. Healing is not some soft, airy-fairy condition. Healing takes the strength of being able to stand, having the capacity, having developed the capacity to stand in the realm of love, to stand in the realm of bliss, which is the realm of love, to stand in that undisturbed state of consciousness that has no fear, and neutrally tap into compassion and wisdom and make choices in life from that place. We talk about wanting a world of peace. We talk about wanting to lay down our arms. But you got to ask yourself, can you do it in your own kitchen? Can you do it in front of the television? The way to evaluate and measure the impact that you have in your world is to be able to measure the capacity that you have to be present and access that quietness that is equally everywhere present, that never changes, that is always available in the face of the cacophony of what it means to be in the world and what it means to be a human being. Let me tell you, it's the hardest work there is. It's easy to dismiss it like, oh yeah, that's for you spiritual types. We're all spiritual types. We're hardwired to be spiritual types. Spirituality is not our problem. Human being is our problem. Understanding the mechanism of being a human being and choosing to respond from a state of quietness rather than react from a place of righteousness. Even if you're right, to be able to respond from a place of quietness or a place of love, a place of undisturbed state of mind that is absent of fear, as opposed to reacting from a state of mind that has a lot of justification through thinking that we are right and that someone's wrong and that we have to convince them that our point of view is the right point of view. To be able to actually cultivate the capacity to listen from an undisturbed state of mind that has no fear, and be a clearing for possibility and peace. Each one of us is hardwired to do that, to be that. Our habitual way of operating, however, is more coming from humanness and the justifications and habit patterns we have of coming from reactivity and righteousness. It becomes a different world as you develop that capacity in yourself, as we all develop that capacity in ourselves. Our own private individual world have more ease and more well-being in them. And then all who think of us, all who speak of us, and all whom we contact gets catalyzed by the state of being that we are bringing. Consider yourself as a tuning fork. And the state of mind that you're in is the resonance that everyone who thinks of you and everyone who speaks of you and everyone who interacts with you experiences. So what resonance do you want to be? And how much work are you willing, how much attention, I should say, are you willing to pay to developing yourself into that? That's true power. That's true effectiveness. That's true leadership. As the Tao Te Ching says, the highest form of leadership is the master walks through the village, and the people think they all did it themselves. Thank you for listening. I wish you well, and I hope to see you next month. Take care.